If Evelyn Stone had known how the night would end, she might have stayed in her dorm room, buried under her textbooks, the way every scholarship student at Columbia was expected to. But 22 years of being strong, composed and relentlessly disciplined, had taught her only one thing: even the sharpest mind couldn't predict betrayal. The bass from the bar's speakers pulsed against her ribs as she pushed through the crowd, her braided hair sticking to the sweat on her neck. She had come here only because Tom insisted. "One night off won't kill you," he'd said with a lazy grin that once felt charming and now felt rehearsed. She had followed him because she wanted to believe they had a future, because she wanted to believe she wasn't just the girl with the scholarship and the second-hand clothes. But the stall door in the marble restroom told her the truth. The moans behind it told her the rest. His voice. Her name, not hers. And Tom's white dress shirt, hanging half-buttoned on a hook, as if he owned the world, and she were merely passing through it. She didn't wait for the explanation he threw after her. She didn't wait for him to pull up his pants, or for Celeste, the blonde, wrapped around him, to toss some mocking comment over her shoulder. The moment Evelyn's hands stopped shaking long enough to open the door, she walked out. But she didn't get far. Celeste's friends were waiting. Girls in glittering dresses and glossy lipstick looking her up and down like she was a smudge on their designer shoes. "Don't be dramatic," one of them drawled. Tom was bored, another added. "You should be grateful he even tried with you." Evelyn tried to push past, but fingers curled around her arm nails, digging in. Someone shoved a shot glass into her hand. "Drink it. Might loosen you up enough to keep a guy." The words stung worse than the liquor. She should have dropped the glass on the floor and walked away. She should have told them to go to hell, that no amount of wealth could buy decency. Instead, she raised the glass to her lips and swallowed until the world blurred around the edges, and the throb behind her eyes drowned out her humiliation. When she stumbled out into the cold, the wind slapped her cheeks, sharp and sobering. She hugged her arms around herself, blinking through tears. Her breath fogged in the alley behind the bar, mixing with the faint scent of fried onions and cigarette smoke. She wasn't sure where she meant to go. She just needed the night to stop crushing her. At the same moment, on the opposite end of the alley, a black town car pulled up, sleek and silent. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, in a tailored charcoal suit that did nothing to hide the tension coiled beneath it. Nathan Pierce had survived corporate wars, boardroom betrayals, and a divorce that carved pieces out of him he would never get back. But tonight had broken something. The news of disloyalty within his own company hit him harder than the whiskey he'd been swallowing since the charity gala ended. And the text from his ex, the demand for more money, more pieces of a life she had abandoned, left a bitter ache in his chest. He loosened his tie, exhaling. The alley was quiet, except for the sound of someone trying to breathe through tears. He looked up. A girl, no, a woman, was stumbling toward him, her silhouette trembling under the street lamp. He didn't move fast enough to avoid her. They collided. He caught her automatically, his hands firm around her arms. She blinked up at him, her eyes huge, glossy, drowning in hurt. "Sorry," she whispered, but the word cracked. I didn't see." But her voice dissolved into a sob before she could finish. Nathan's breath stalled. He had seen grief before, cold, calculating, restrained. But this was raw, unfiltered pain. He didn't even realize he had spoken until he heard his own voice, low and rough. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but tears streamed down anyway. "No, I mean, yes, I don't know." She pressed her hands to her face. "I just want tonight to stop." Something twisted in him, something dangerous, something human. He wasn't the kind of man who comforted strangers. He wasn't the kind who touched people first. Yet somehow his thumb brushed the tear from her cheek before he could stop himself. The moment his skin met hers, Evelyn felt something warm cut through the alcohol fog, an anchor in the swirling mess of heartbreak. His voice was deep, steady, a kind of gentleness she hadn't felt in years. "Come here," he murmured, barely audible. It wasn't a command. It was an understanding. She leaned forward before she could think twice. Her forehead touched his chest, and when she felt the quiet rise and fall of his breath, she let herself break. Nathan froze. For a heartbeat, he didn't breathe, didn't move. The weight of her against him awakened a part of him he had forgotten existed. A part that remembered loneliness, remembered longing, remembered what it felt like to hold someone who needed him. "Easy," he said softly, though his own voice wasn't steady anymore. "Just breathe." But Evelyn couldn't. Each inhale trembled, each exhale cracked, and her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. She didn't know this man, but somehow she trusted the quiet strength in his arms, more than she trusted anyone else tonight. She whispered, slurred by alcohol and grief, "Why does everything hurt so much?" Nathan should have stepped back. He should have disentangled her hands, offered to call someone, walked away. But the sincerity of her question, its naked vulnerability, hit him deeper than he expected. It made him think of his son, of the life he'd tried to build, of every moment he'd given pieces of himself until nothing was left. He swallowed. "Because people can be cruel." He didn't expect her next words. "He cheated on me. In the bathroom. With one of them." Her voice wavered. "And they laughed at me." Nathan's jaw tightened. The whiskey burned at the back of his throat. They shouldn't have. The wind kicked up cold and sharp. She shivered violently. Instinct overrode everything else. "Come on," he said. "There's a hotel around the corner. Just somewhere warm. You're freezing." She didn't question him, didn't ask his name, didn't wonder who he was. The alcohol softened her fear, and his quiet presence softened the rest. They walked side by side through the dim streetlights, her shoulder brushing his arm with every uneven step. He kept a careful distance, though his eyes stayed on her, ready to catch her if she stumbled again. Inside the hotel lobby, the warm air thawed her fingers. But the moment they stepped into the elevator, something shifted. The confined space, the hum of electricity, the dim light, it all blurred into a quiet intimacy neither of them had intended. Her reflection trembled in the elevator's mirrored wall, mascara-smudged eyes, still glossy hair mussed by the wind. She expected him to look away, but he didn't. Instead, his gaze held hers, steady, unreadable, but impossibly gentle. She felt seen, not judged. For the first time in hours, she felt like she could breathe without breaking apart. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back. She didn't. His fingertips grazed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Let's just get you to a room," he said softly, though there was something else in his voice now, an edge he didn't fully understand. "Okay," she whispered. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, the silence between them thickening with every step. When the room door clicked shut behind them, the world outside seemed to disappear. He helped her sit on the edge of the bed, stepping back, as if distance could calm the magnetic pull between them. For a moment, they only stared at each other, two strangers bound by nothing except heartbreak, exhaustion, and the heat of the alcohol lingering in their veins. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, though she made no move to leave. "No," he agreed, though he didn't open the door. "Neither should I." Her smile was sad, fragile. "Then maybe it doesn't matter." Something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the whiskey, or the loneliness, or the quiet courage in her eyes, despite everything she had endured. Maybe it was all of it. Either way, when she leaned toward him, he didn't step back. He met her halfway. The kiss was soft questioning, a gentle apology for the world that had hurt them both. But when she clung to him trembling, he wrapped his arms around her with a certainty he hadn't felt in years. Warmth, safety, the scent of cedarwood and mint, the faint hitch in his breath when her fingers brushed his jaw. The way his touch held no expectation, only comfort. It should have stopped there. But grief made them honest, and loneliness made them brave, and the night made them human. He whispered her name, as if afraid to forget it. She whispered his, as if committing it to memory. Their hearts beat too fast, their breaths tangled, and the rest of the world faded into a blur of warmth and darkness. When morning came, sunlight spilled across tangled sheets, and two people who had meant only to escape the night, but found something far more dangerous. Evelyn woke first. Her head pounded, her memory frayed at the edges. She didn't remember his face clearly, only the warmth of his embrace, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the low voice that told her she wasn't alone. She noticed the faint scent on the pillow beside her. Cedarwood, mint, and something undeniably him. Nathan stirred awake hours later, but she was gone. All that remained was the ghost of her touch, the memory of dark eyes shining through tears, and the way her vulnerability had felt like a confession against his skin. He didn't remember her name. She didn't remember his face. But neither of them forgot the pull, or the ache, or the way the night felt less cruel when they held each other. They left without knowing who the other was, without exchanging numbers, without imagining the impossible truth waiting for them, that they would meet again. In the brightest room of the brightest university, under the harshest circumstances, and that fate was far from finished with them. A week was long enough for bruises to fade, not long enough for memories to settle. Evelyn Stone told herself she had moved on that one night. One mistake, one stranger's warmth couldn't follow her into the bright, demanding halls of Columbia University. The campus buzzed with early fall energy, crisp air students clutching coffees, the faint golden tint of morning sun dripping through the old brick archways. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her backpack, inhaled deeply, and willed her heartbeat to slow. Today was important. Today marked the beginning of the course she had worked months to qualify for, mathematical foundations for artificial intelligence. Whispered about, fought over, the class was only offered once a year and taught by a rotating list of world-renowned experts. This semester's instructor was the most anticipated one yet. She heard the chatter as she walked toward the lecture hall, excited, half gossip, half reverence. They say he started coding algorithms at 11. He sold his first patent at 16. Pierce Dynamics practically defines the AI industry. And he doesn't even take speaking fees. He just shows up and teaches. A billionaire in a Columbia classroom, I mean, come on. He's a genius. My cousin met him once at a conference. Apparently he barely talks to anyone. Total introvert. Hot introvert. That made the group laugh, the sound echoing off the high ceiling. Evelyn tried not to roll her eyes. She wasn't here to fangirl over someone's bank account. She was here to prove, mostly to herself, that she deserved her seat in this elite circle. She found a spot near the middle, taking her notebook out with steady hands she didn't quite feel. A few rows ahead, she recognized the familiar golden brown hair of the last person she wanted to see. Tom Pierce lounged back in his seat as if he owned the room. He had always been good-looking, in a polished, privileged way, the kind of handsome that money sharpened rather than softened. Evelyn looked away quickly, her chest tightening. She wasn't afraid of him, but she was still bruised by the memory of how easily he'd discarded her, how easily he'd let others humiliate her. A week wasn't enough to erase that. She flipped open her notebook, trying to ignore the heat creeping up her neck. She could almost pretend Tom wasn't there until their professor arrived. The room hummed like an electric wire. Backpacks shifted, phones lowered, whispers stilled. The door swung open, and her world stuttered. Nathan Pierce stepped inside. There was no mistaking him. Not the tall frame, not the deliberate stride, not the quiet authority that followed him like a shadow, not the scent that drifted faintly in as the door shut behind him. Cedarwood mint, and something warm and clean that flash burned through her memory like lightning. Evelyn's lungs forgot how to take in air. She gripped her pen until her fingers ached. It couldn't be him. Not the man from the alley. Not the stranger whose heartbeat she had fallen asleep against. Not the one whose voice she still heard in flashes when the night was too quiet. But it was. He walked toward the podium. Dark navy shirt rolled at the sleeves. Posture straight expression. Focused in a way that felt colder, more contained than she remembered. His eyes swept across the class in a measured glance. Sharp, assessing, detached. And then they landed on her. Time fractured. Nathan's stride faltered, barely detectable to anyone but her. His eyes widened a fraction, a flicker, a shock he wiped from his features almost instantly, but not before she saw it. Recognition, confusion, and something dangerously close to disbelief. Evelyn sat frozen, the edges of her vision trembling. She couldn't look away. His gaze held hers for a breath too long, then snapped forward again, as if he had slammed an invisible door shut. But she had seen enough to know he remembered. He felt it, and he was fighting it. Nathan cleared his throat, faintly placed a folder on the podium, and addressed the class with a composure so precise it felt like armor. Good morning. I'm Nathan Pierce. This semester I'll be leading your exploration of mathematical frameworks in artificial intelligence. His voice. God. Her stomach clenched the memory of that same voice whispering against her hair in a hotel room, slicing through her composure. The class leaned in, fascinated. Half of them were probably taking mental pictures, replaying the fact that one of the richest men in America stood 3 feet from them. But Evelyn wasn't starstruck. She was undone. She clutched her notebook tighter, willing herself not to crumble. She shouldn't have been shocked. Pierce Dynamics. Tom Pierce. The last name had always been there. She just never connected the dots. Tom had mentioned a father, yes, but only in vague, dismissive remarks. Never anything that revealed the man behind the name. Never that he was this. Never that he was the stranger who had held her while she fell apart. As Nathan began outlining the course structure, Evelyn forced herself to breathe evenly. She needed to focus. She needed to act normal. She needed to bury the memory of the night they shared, because in this room, he wasn't the man who steadied her trembling hands. He was her professor. Her professor, who also happened to be her ex-boyfriend's father. A fresh wave of nausea swept over her. This was a nightmare dressed as a coincidence. She tried to steady herself, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Nathan's eyes flicked to her again, mid-sentence, quick, precise, sharp as a blade. He saw the tremor in her hands. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked away before anyone else noticed, but Evelyn felt the shift in the air, the tautness in his spine, the turmoil he was fighting beneath his calm. She looked down quickly, but it was too late. Tom had noticed. His chair creaked as he leaned forward, his gaze darting between her and Nathan, like he was tracking invisible threads. The narrowing of Tom's eyes wasn't loud, but it was violent in its own quiet way. Suspicion, curiosity, something darker. Evelyn's pulse hammered. The walls felt too close, the room too bright. She imagined Tom piecing it all together, every cruel assumption he could make. But he couldn't. He couldn't possibly guess the truth. Even she could barely process it. The lecture continued, brilliant, clear, transformative, in the way only a mind like Nathan's could make it. But Evelyn caught only fragments. Her thoughts spiraled, tangled, fraying at the edges. She kept seeing flashes of their night in each passing glance he gave her. The blur of his features as she cried into his chest. His gentle hand brushing a tear from her cheek. His lips whispering her name like a confession. And now this. Him standing at the podium with a presence so commanding, the entire room bowed under it. Yet every so often, his eyes flickered back to her, like a moth drawn to a flame he didn't want to acknowledge. Halfway through the lecture, Nathan paused to write an equation on the board, his hand steady, elegant, even in motion. When he turned back, his gaze passed over rows of students and snagged on her once more. This time, his control cracked. Just a hairline fracture, a flicker of regret, a shadow of something unspoken. Evelyn swallowed hard. A question formed in her chest, fragile and dangerous. Did he wish that night had never happened, or did it haunt him the way it haunted her? Tom shifted again, attention sharpening. He was connecting dots that didn't exist yet. The lecture ended, and the room erupted with excited chatter. Students rushed forward to introduce themselves, flooding Nathan with questions. Evelyn remained glued to her seat, her entire body tense. She couldn't approach him. She couldn't leave. Both paths felt like traps. Nathan glanced up once as the crowd swarmed him as if searching for someone. No searching for her. She felt the pull of it, the ache of it. But he looked away just as quickly, and the mask slipped over him again. Untouchable, detached, professional. She rose slowly, gathering her things with hands that still trembled. She could feel Tom's eyes burning into her from across the room. She didn't look at him. She couldn't look at Nathan, not when her heart felt like it was trying to escape her chest. As she reached the aisle, she heard Tom's voice behind her, quiet, razor sharp. Interesting first day, huh? Her pulse stumbled. She kept walking, but his next words, soft, suspicious, carrying the first sparks of a coming storm, made her entire world tilt. You looked shaken, almost like you recognized him. Evelyn froze, just for a fraction of a second. But Tom noticed. Nathan did too. His head snapped up, his expression unreadable. Evelyn forced her legs to move. The door closed behind her with a final click, one that sounded far too much like a warning. Outside, the autumn air hit her skin like cold truth. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Fate had thrown the three of them into the same room, and the consequences were no longer avoidable. The night she tried to forget had just walked into her future, wearing a wedding ring, once holding a chalk marker now, and carrying secrets that could shatter everything. And somewhere between the alleys of Manhattan and the polished floors of Columbia, her heart had made a mistake it couldn't undo. Nathan Pierce was her professor, her ex's father, and the man whose arms still felt like the safest place she had ever known. The storm had only just begun. Evelyn should have known. Columbia rumors traveled faster than truth, faster than logic, faster than anyone's ability to breathe between classes. The moment she stepped out of Nathan Pierce's lecture hall with trembling hands and an expression she couldn't disguise, the whispers began. By midday, they had solidified into something sharp enough to cut. She heard them in the corridors floating behind her like toxic mist. She totally knows him. Did you see her face? She looked guilty. Maybe that's why she got into the class special access. Please look at her. She's pretty in a tragic way. He probably took pity on her. Or she's sleeping with him. Rich older men love a charity case. Each word sank into her skin like tiny needles. and no matter how fast she walked, the echo of gossip clung to her heels. She tried to keep her chin high, tried to remember that she had earned everything she had here. But every now and then between classes, her mind betrayed her, showing flashes of the man she had seen in that elevator reflection, the warmth of him, the way he had looked at her that morning with a mixture of shock and something unbearably human. She didn't know how to navigate this. She barely knew how to breathe around him, and the rumors only made everything worse. By late afternoon, when she ducked into the academic building's restroom to splash water on her face and regain composure, she was tired, overstretched, and dangerously close to unraveling. The corridor was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt staged. Evelyn washed her hands slowly, trying to steady her breath. She didn't notice the footsteps behind her until the door thudded shut with a hard, deliberate click. She turned and froze. Celeste Beaumont leaned against the door arms, crossed lips curled into a smile that had nothing to do with humor. Two other girls flanked her, both wearing the smug expression of people who had never been told no in their lives. "Well, well," Celeste drawled, pushing off the door with predatory grace. "If it isn't the scholarship sweetheart." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "I'm not interested in whatever this is," she said quietly, attempting to step past them. Celeste blocked her path with the sharp shift of a manicured hand. "Oh, but I am. I'm very interested, actually." The tone sent cold ripples through Evelyn's spine. "Word around campus says you've been getting cozy with Professor Pierce." She let the words hang, observing Evelyn's face with hungry scrutiny. "The father of your ex-boyfriend Celeste," added sweetly. How poetic. Trash climbing to the top using trashy methods. Evelyn clenched her jaw. "It's not true. Isn't it?" Celeste stepped closer, her perfume chokingly sweet. "Funny, because Tom thinks something's going on. You should have seen him after class storming around looking like someone stole his inheritance." Evelyn flinched. Celeste's eyes glittered. "Oh, you didn't think Tom would just watch you flirt your way up the ladder? Right?" Evelyn's voice trembled despite her efforts. "I don't want trouble." "But trouble wants you," Celeste whispered. And suddenly the room shifted. The two girls moved in sync, grabbing Evelyn's arms, dragging her toward the men's restroom next door, which was empty due to late afternoon class rotations. Panic surged. "Let me go!" Evelyn twisted, but their grip tightened. Celeste shoved the door open with her shoulder, pushing Evelyn inside. The tile was cold beneath her shoes, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead like a broken insect. "You want attention," Celeste jeered. "We'll give you some." The girls pinned Evelyn against the wall, one gripping her shoulders, the other pulling at her backpack, until it fell to the floor with a soft thud. Celeste pulled out her phone. "Let's get a little video proof. Tom will want to see what you've been up to." Evelyn's pulse jackhammered. "Please don't." Begging already. How predictable. Celeste reached into her designer purse and pulled out a tube of red lipstick. "If you're going to play the part of a desperate little whore, we should dress you for the role." Evelyn thrashed hard, panic spiking as Celeste uncapped the lipstick with a snap. Tears burned behind her eyes. "Stop. Please don't touch me." Her voice cracked raw and desperate. Celeste only laughed, leaning in. "Hold her still." The girls tightened their grip. Evelyn felt the cold tile pressing into her back, the humiliation closing in like a suffocating cloud. She squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the bright smear of lipstick against her skin, for the click of a camera killing whatever dignity she had left for the worst moment of her life, repeating itself in a new form. But it didn't come, because the door burst open with a force that rattled the hinges. Enough. Nathan's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a storm. Every head snapped toward him. His presence filled the doorway, imposing furious, controlled only by the thinnest thread of restraint. His eyes landed on Evelyn first. Her trembling body, the hands pinning her, the smear of fear across her face, and something dangerous ignited behind his gaze. Evelyn had never seen a man look like that, like he was holding back a hurricane with sheer will. "Tung ngui mot," he said, English, clipped and precise voice like carved steel. "Out." Celeste's confidence faltered. "Professor Pierce, we were just—" "If you're still here in 5 seconds," he continued, stepping forward, "I'll make sure the disciplinary board sees the footage from this hallway." His voice dropped lower. "Every angle." The girls didn't wait for him to finish. They bolted Celeste, paling her lipstick still uncapped in her trembling hand, her heels clattering wildly as she fled the room. The door swung shut behind them, leaving the air electric and heavy. Evelyn stood rooted in place, breath uneven, fingers trembling violently. Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides, removing his suit jacket without a word. He wrapped it around her shoulders with a gentleness that shattered her. She looked up, and for the first time fully saw his face in the bright light. The strong jaw, the lines carved by stress and sleeplessness, the eyes that held weariness and worry, and something unbearably human. Last week, she had only known him through the haze of tears and whiskey. But here, sober, sharp, burningly present, he was devastatingly real. "Are you hurt?" His voice was quieter now, strained around the edges. Evelyn shook her head, then nodded, unable to answer properly. A tear slipped down her cheek. Nathan's expression tightened, a shadow crossing his features. "Come," he murmured, guiding her toward the door. His hand hovered near her back, not quite touching, but close enough that she felt the heat of him steadying her. The walk to the campus health center was slow, silent, punctuated by the echo of their footsteps and the pounding of Evelyn's heart. The autumn wind brushed against her skin, but Nathan's jacket kept her warm, smelling faintly of cedarwood and mint, and something she now recognized painfully well, him. Inside the health center, Nathan spoke to the nurse with a calm professionalism that contrasted violently with the fury she'd seen minutes earlier. He didn't hover, didn't interrogate, didn't push. He simply waited. Arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor, like he was wrestling with 50 different impulses at once. When the nurse finally left, Evelyn sat on the examination table, jacket still wrapped tightly around her. Nathan stepped closer, but not too close, just close enough for her to feel the gravity of him again. "Evelyn," he said softly, tasting her name like it was something he wasn't supposed to want. "You shouldn't have been alone." She swallowed. "It wasn't your responsibility." His jaw flexed. "I'm aware," he said quietly. "It doesn't change anything." Their eyes locked, and something raw surfaced between them, unwanted, unspoken, undeniable. He shouldn't care this much. She shouldn't feel this safe. He shouldn't let his gaze soften when it met hers. She shouldn't remember how his arms felt around her in another room, another night. But they did. Both of them. Nathan exhaled slowly, almost shaking it out of his system. "You're safe now," he said, more to himself than her. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Because the distance between them was shrinking, not physically, but in ways that terrified her. The more he tried to maintain boundaries, the more they blurred. And the more boundaries blurred, the harder the fall would be. Nathan stepped back, finally, a fraction too quickly, as though any longer in her orbit might break something he couldn't mend. "I'll make sure this doesn't happen again." His voice was low, firm, carrying a promise he had no right to make, but made anyway. Evelyn watched him, heart trembling. The night she met him had been a mistake neither of them remembered clearly. But this moment, his fury, his protectiveness, the softness beneath both, she would remember it forever. And for the first time, she felt the shape of the storm truly forming. Not outside them, between them. Fate wasn't finished with either of them. And neither, she realized with a shiver, were they finished with each other. The health center's fluorescent lights hummed like a fragile warning, but nothing could steady the storm inside Nathan Pierce. After the nurse left, and Evelyn sat wrapped in his jacket, the distance he had tried so desperately to impose professionally, ethically, morally felt like little more than a paper wall collapsing under the weight of everything they weren't saying. He kept his back to her at first. He needed the barrier, however thin. The polished floor reflected faint shadows of his hands opening and closing in agitation. He could still see the red lipstick in Celeste's fingers, the fear in Evelyn's eyes, the tremor in her breath when she whispered, "Please." And he could still feel throat tightening the instinct that had ripped through him. The instinct to protect her with everything he had, everything he was. "You didn't have to come," Evelyn murmured behind him, her voice soft but steady. He didn't turn. He didn't trust himself to. "I couldn't not," he said, the words low, pulled from somewhere unguarded. Silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the edge of the jacket he draped over her shoulders. It dwarfed her, too big, too warm, too him. And somehow that made everything worse. "Nathan." She whispered just the name, and it sent a pulse through him so sharp he had to exhale to keep control. Her voice had always done that, cut through the noise, through the grief, through the walls he'd built around the parts of himself he thought were long gone. He finally turned to her. She was sitting on the exam bed, knees drawn slightly inward, hair wild from the scuffle, eyes dark with thoughts she couldn't mask. She looked heartbreakingly young and unbearably strong all at once. He stepped closer, slow enough to give her space, but not far enough to hide the pull that yanked him toward her. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "what happened today, what's been happening, isn't your fault. But it can't happen again." Her breath hitched. "Meaning," he swallowed. "Meaning, distance." The word felt wrong on his tongue. Cruel, unnatural, but necessary. Or at least that's what he kept telling himself. "The night we met," he began, voice tightening, "we were both in a place we shouldn't have been. We were hurting, vulnerable, and drunk. It was a mistake." Evelyn stiffened, but she didn't look away. "If it was a mistake," she said quietly, "then why does it still feel so real?" His jaw locked. She continued, voice steady but unbearably gentle. "You held me like you cared. You touched me like I mattered. You did," he said before he could stop himself. She breathed in sharply, and he realized too late that he'd stepped closer. His shadow now fell over her, her face tilted up toward him with too much trust, too much hope, too much danger. "Nathan," she whispered, "I don't want to pretend that night didn't mean something." He closed his eyes. "It can't mean anything," he whispered back. "You're my student." "For a semester," she countered. "And it's not like you even plan to teach here long term." His throat tightened. She wasn't wrong. He had agreed to teach for 1 term, only mostly to appease a friend on the board and escape his own life for a few months. But that didn't matter. "You were also dating Tom," he added, feeling the words cut into both of them. Evelyn's expression flickered. Was she corrected softly? Past tense. "He's still my son," Nathan said, "and he's already watching us too closely." "Because he's paranoid," Evelyn answered, voice trembling with the memory of Tom's cruelty. "Not because there's anything to find." She didn't mean it as a challenge, but it landed like one. Nathan exhaled shakily. "Evelyn, I'm trying to do the right thing." "So am I," she whispered. "But it's getting hard to breathe pretending that nothing happened." Her honesty broke something in him. A fracture that had been spreading since the moment he found her in the restroom, since the night he held her in the alley, since the instant their eyes met across the classroom. He lowered his gaze, but she stood and stepped closer. Just one step, barely a shift of weight, but enough to tilt the entire room. Her voice was shaking now. "I don't care what the rumors say. I don't care what Celeste or anyone else thinks. I'm not trying to use you. I'm not trying to hurt anyone." She met his eyes, and the vulnerability there destroyed him. "I just can't forget how safe I felt with you, how safe I still feel." Safe. God. Nathan felt the word like a bruise pressed too hard. Safety was something he hadn't offered anyone in years, something he didn't trust himself with anymore. But she said it like it was the truth, and he knew without question that for her it had been. "Evelyn." He started, but his voice was barely a breath. She shook her head gently, stepping close enough for him to feel the warmth of her body, close enough to smell the faint lavender of her hair beneath his jacket. "Tell me I'm wrong," she whispered. "Tell me you didn't feel anything. Tell me that night meant nothing. Tell me you don't think about it." His hand tightened at his side. He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. And that was her answer. Evelyn inhaled the air catching in her throat. She took one last small step toward him until she was right in front of him, their breaths mingling in the narrow space between them. Then stopped pretending. She didn't touch him. She didn't have to. Her nearness unraveled him piece by piece. He felt the truth he'd been denying, pressing against his ribs, pounding in his blood, rising through his chest like a tidal wave rushing toward shore, with no intention of stopping. "Nathan," she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips pulled him under. His restraint snapped. He cupped her face with a reverence that shocked even him, fingers trembling as they brushed her cheek. She gasped softly at the warmth of his touch, and that single sound was the spark that ignited everything. He dipped his head and kissed her. Not like the desperate, unremembered fragments of their drunken night. This was deliberate. A slow, searing devotion that curled through her lungs, stealing air, stealing thought, stealing caution. She melted into him, hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. He kissed her like he had been starving for a week, not for her body, but for the right to feel something again. The right to feel alive. He broke the kiss, only to breathe her name forehead pressed to hers. Their breaths entangled, their hearts racing in unison. "We can't," he whispered, voice ragged. "Then why does it feel like we already have?" She breathed. He kissed her again in answer, another slow, aching confession, before pulling her closer, his arms circling her faster than reason could intervene. They clung to each other like two people finally admitting a truth they'd been drowning under. When they finally parted, breathless, dizzy, trembling, the room felt entirely too small to hold the consequences of what had just happened. Nathan pressed his forehead to hers one last time, whispering a vow he already knew he couldn't keep. "This has to stay between us." "I know," she whispered, though her heart ached at the words. "But it doesn't change what it is." And she was right. Whatever existed between them had already begun long before they'd tried to stop it, long before they'd recognized it, maybe even before they'd met sober. It lived in every look, every silence, every moment their eyes found each other when they shouldn't. They left the health center separately, their steps unsynchronized, but their hearts painfully aligned. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The decision was already made. They would hide it. They would pretend. They would lie to everyone, maybe even to themselves. But Tom saw Evelyn slip out of the building moments later, saw the flush on her cheeks, the grip on her backpack, the unmistakable remnants of something she tried desperately to mask. Suspicion flickered in his eyes again, stronger, sharper, darker. And when he later noticed his father emerging from the same building, gaze distant and jaw locked, the spark ignited. The air shifted. The danger grew. The storm deepened. Their secret had begun, and so had the unraveling. Evelyn had always thought storms announced themselves with distant thunder, with changing winds, with some kind of warning. But the storm that unraveled her world arrived without sound, without mercy, in the space of a single heartbeat. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky was impossibly clear and deceptive, as if daring misfortune to prove itself real. Nathan had insisted on driving her home after an extended study session, disguised as office hours, though both of them knew it was becoming harder and harder to pretend their meetings were strictly academic. He parked a discreet distance from campus housing as usual, taking every precaution to keep their secret from curious eyes. Evelyn hesitated before opening the door, her hand lingering on the handle. "Nathan, thank you for everything." Her voice was soft, weighted with unspoken affection. He looked at her with that same quiet intensity that had undone her since the moment she'd seen him under the fluorescent lights of the health center. "Text me when you're inside," he murmured. "Please." She nodded, heart fluttering, reaching for her bag. But when she stepped out of the car and shut the door behind her, she didn't make it 3 full steps. The world snapped. Tom appeared at the edge of the sidewalk like a ghost pulled from her worst memories. He stared at the car, then at her, disbelief cracking his expression into something raw and feral. "You have got to be kidding me." His voice sliced through the quiet. "Evelyn." She froze, breath snagging in her throat. The driver's side door opened behind her. Too soon, too fast. Nathan stepped out, his expression shifting instantly from warmth to steel the moment he saw Tom. And Tom. Tom put it together with horrifying speed. His face twisted. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No. Tell me you're not doing this. Tell me you're not screwing my father to get back at me." Evelyn jerked as if slapped. "Tom? No, it's not." "Don't lie to me," he shouted, and something inside her trembled so hard she thought her knees might give. "You're pathetic," he snarled. "I dump you, and you go running into his bed. Was that the plan all along?" "Stop," Nathan growled, stepping forward with a force Evelyn had never seen from him. Tom pointed at him, laughing breathlessly, hysteria lacing the sound. "Oh my God, you're actually defending her. This is unbelievable. What kind of sick midlife crisis is this? And you," he turned on Evelyn, eyes bright with betrayal. "You're disgusting." The words pierced her composure, cracking the dam she'd held for too long. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could wipe them away. "I didn't do this to hurt you," she managed, voice fractured. "I never meant—" "Shut up," Tom roared. "I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Were you sleeping with him while you were with me?" "No," she cried, shaking. "I swear, Tom never—" But he was beyond hearing. "You think anyone will believe you? You think the school will? He's your professor." The last word echoed like a blade thrown between them. Nathan's restraint, so carefully held, so painfully earned, finally broke. In 2 strides, he reached Tom and shoved him back harder than he intended, fury lighting every line of his face. "Enough." Tom stumbled, shock exploding across his features. He hadn't expected his father, the man who rarely raised his voice, rarely raised his hand, rarely raised anything at all, to lose control for Evelyn. Tom's pride flared violently. "Oh, this is perfect," he spat. "Go ahead, hit me again. I'll file every report the university has ethical violations, abuse of power, whatever it takes. You'll lose your position. She'll lose everything." Evelyn gasped. "Tom, stop, please." But he wasn't stopping. "You're done," he hissed at Nathan. "Both of you." Then he pulled out his phone with deliberate malice. "I'm reporting this. A professor sleeping with his own student. The school will bury you." Nathan moved, but Evelyn caught his sleeve with shaking fingers. "Nathan, please." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tom turned and stormed away, already typing furiously, already gathering the ammunition he believed would ruin them. And then it happened, the moment that would splinter their lives into before and after. Evelyn's vision blurred, her breath seized, and the world tilted sideways. She swayed, one hand lifting weakly, as if reaching for something that wasn't there. Nathan's instincts exploded. He caught her just before she collapsed, her body going limp against him. "Evelyn." He lifted her into his arms, heart pounding in his throat, panic sharper than anything he'd felt in decades. "Stay with me." She didn't answer. Her eyelashes fluttered, her face pale, her breathing shallow. Nathan yelled for help. Flagged. The nearest passing student rushed her into the car and tore through city streets toward the nearest hospital with a kind of reckless desperation he'd never known. At the ER, nurses rushed her onto a gurney as Nathan tried to follow, but a nurse barrier stopped him at the double doors. "We'll take care of her, sir. You need to wait outside." Wait outside. The words felt like knives. Minutes stretched into something unbearable, elastic and cruel, stretching past the point of sanity. Nathan sat, stood, paced, sat again, hands shaking as he replayed every second of her collapse. This was his fault, his choices, his failures, his inability to walk away, his inability to stay away. He had tried to keep distance. He had failed, and now she was paying the price. When the doctor finally approached Nathan, rose so fast the chair toppled behind him. "Is she okay?" he demanded, voice hoarse. The doctor's expression was neutral, professional, but not grave. "She's stable," he said. Relief hit Nathan so hard he nearly staggered. The doctor extended a small, glossy print toward him. "And she'll need to be careful. She's dehydrated and under a lot of stress, but the baby appears healthy." Nathan's heartbeat faltered. "The baby. Congratulations," the doctor said gently. "She's 7 weeks pregnant." For a moment, Nathan's mind emptied completely. 7 weeks. The math clicked into place 1 week before the semester began. 1 week after the night he'd found her in the alley, both of them drunk, broken, clinging to each other in the dark like lifelines. He looked down at the ultrasound picture, hands shaking violently. A faint gray shape, a flickering heartbeat, a truth that rewrote everything he thought he knew. "She's awake if you want to see her," the doctor added. Nathan walked toward her room in a daze. When he stepped inside, she was sitting half upright, hospital sheet around her waist, eyes still glassy from exhaustion. She looked impossibly small in the sterile white room. "Nathan." Her voice trembled, more vulnerable than he had ever heard it. He sat beside her, careful but unable to stop his hand from reaching for hers. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around his with a kind of desperate certainty. The doctor said, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Tears gathered along her lashes, shimmering like confession. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I had no idea. I would never." "I know," he said quickly, fiercely. "Evelyn, look at me." She did, eyes wide, terrified, hopeful. He lifted the ultrasound photo between them, the tiny heartbeat frozen in grainy grayscale. "This." His voice cracked. is us. Evelyn exhaled a shaky breath, her other hand covering her mouth as a soft sob escaped. Nathan, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. He squeezed her fingers, steadying her, steadying himself. You're not alone, he said, voice low, absolute. You and the baby, you both have me. She cried harder, quiet, shaking tears, leaning into his touch, like it was the only anchor she had. And Nathan knew, without question, without hesitation, that something irreversible had happened. Not because of the baby, but because the moment she collapsed, the moment he thought he might lose her, the truth inside him broke free. He loved her. He didn't know when it had happened. Maybe the night in the alley, maybe the morning in the classroom, maybe in the restroom. When fear shattered her strength, and he realized protecting her had become instinct. But he loved her with a depth that terrified him. He brushed a tear from her cheek, letting his forehead rest lightly against hers. This wasn't planned, he whispered. It wasn't expected. She nodded faintly. But it's ours, he finished. She closed her eyes, breathing him in. And in that small hospital room, with an ultrasound photo between their hands, and a future neither of them had foreseen unfurling before them, something solid and undeniable settled into place. The storm had torn everything open. But for the first time, they weren't falling apart. They were falling together. Nathan had always believed that the most difficult choices in life were the ones that forced a person to choose which part of himself he was willing to lose. But sitting in the university's boardroom 2 days after Evelyn fainted, listening to a panel of administrators recite policies about faculty conduct, authority, propriety, and ethical boundaries, he realized the hardest choices were the ones that demanded he choose what part of his life he wanted to protect, his career or the woman he loved. The decision had been made long before he ever stepped into that room. It had been made the moment he lifted Evelyn's unconscious body into his arms. It had been made the second he saw the ultrasound. It had been made the moment he understood that losing his position was nothing compared to losing her. But the board didn't know that. They saw only headlines waiting to happen, scandals itching to break liability painted in every angle. The dean cleared his throat, looking at Nathan as though hoping to find a denial that could neatly wrap the situation. Nathan, we need clarity. The accusation filed by your son states a romantic entanglement with a student. We need to know how to proceed. Nathan didn't flinch. He placed both hands on the table, steady and certain. Proceed with my resignation. The room stilled. The dean blinked hard. I'm not asking you to. I'm not giving you a scandal, Nathan said calmly. I'm giving you closure. A murmur rippled through the board. Phones slid discreetly into pockets. Lawyers exchanged glances. A few members leaned forward, as if trying to read more from his expression than he was offering. But Nathan spoke before anyone else could. There was no abuse of power, he said. No coercion, no manipulation, no grade interference. Evelyn Stone's work stands entirely on its own merit. Anyone who has watched her in class would know that. Anyone who has seen her academic record would know that. A tense silence spread. He didn't let it breathe. But she is also someone I care for deeply, and I will not allow her to be dragged through months of hearings and interrogations to prove what I already know. One of the trustees folded his hands. Mr. Pierce, Nathan, if the relationship began before your teaching engagement, that changes the context. If we understand the timeline. Nathan shook his head. The timeline doesn't matter. They stared at him confused. He met every gaze without faltering. What matters is that I am the one who crossed the line. I pursued her. I allowed personal feelings to conflict with professional boundaries. Evelyn is not at fault. She never was. The dean sat back heavily, exhaling. You're certain about this. More certain than I've been about anything in years. The board fell into subdued conversation, voices hushed, papers shuffling. Nathan waited in silence, feeling the finality settle over him, not as a burden, but as an unexpected peace. After 10 minutes, the dean returned. We will accept your resignation effective immediately. The investigation is closed. Nathan nodded once, not out of defeat, but acceptance. He walked out of the room knowing exactly what he had lost, and exactly what he had chosen. Evelyn was waiting for him outside the administration building, her hands clenched in front of her knuckles, pale against her dark skin. When she saw him, she rushed forward, eyes wide with fear. What happened, Nathan? Please tell me. He didn't let her finish. He cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing trembling skin. It's over, he said softly. The investigation's done. You're clear. She blinked, relief flooding her features until she noticed the heaviness in his eyes. And you? She asked, voice barely audible. Nathan exhaled. I resigned. The world seemed to still around her. The wind stopped nipping at her curls. The distant campus chatter faded. Only the pounding of her heart remained. You resigned, she whispered. Because of me. Nathan shook his head immediately. Not because of you. Because it was the only way to keep you safe. And because it was time. Nathan. Her throat tightened. You didn't need to give up your name, your position, your reputation. He silenced her with a soft touch to her cheek. I've had my name for 42 years. I've had money, titles, businesses, influence. I've had everything except someone who makes me want to wake up and choose something other than work. His voice lowered, warm and steady. And now I have you. Her breath caught. You don't have to choose me over everything else. I'm not choosing you over my life, he murmured. I'm choosing you as my life. The words hit her with such tenderness that her knees weakened. She leaned into his chest, letting herself breathe in the scent that had slowly become her anchor. He wrapped an arm around her stomach, instinctively, protective, unknowingly cradling more than just her. The next week moved quickly. Lawyers arranged paperwork. The university issued a brief, sterile statement thanking Nathan for his service as a visiting scholar. Rumors died once no scandal surfaced, and Nathan kept his promise, never letting Evelyn face another moment alone. They moved into his penthouse overlooking the city. It was too large for two people, too quiet for a new family, but it wrapped around them like a fresh beginning. Evelyn had never lived anywhere like it. High ceilings, glass walls, polished stone floors. But what overwhelmed her wasn't the luxury. It was the gentleness Nathan carried into every room she entered. He cooked for her terribly at first, burning scrambled eggs and turning pasta into something resembling glue. But she laughed through every failed attempt, and he kept trying, determined to feed her something that didn't come from takeout boxes. He made sure she ate every few hours, coaxing her through nausea, sitting beside her when she couldn't keep food down, holding her quietly until the dizziness passed. At night, he pressed warm tea into her hands and guided her gently toward the bed, as if she were made of something precious, something priceless. When she woke up from nightmares about Tom's shouts, about Celeste's lipstick, about losing everything, Nathan was always there. His fingers brushed her hair back, his voice low and unwavering. You're safe, he'd whisper. I'm right here. And she believed him. She believed it in a way she had never believed safety before. Their love deepened in those quiet hours without dramatic declarations, without clandestine meetings. Just soft mornings, shared silence, and a tenderness neither of them had known they were capable of. Sometimes, Nathan would stop mid-sentence, mid-work, mid-motion, and look at her with an expression that held awe and fear and devotion all tangled together, as if he still couldn't believe she was real, as if he couldn't believe he was allowed to have her. And Evelyn, when she caught him staring like that, felt warmth bloom in her chest so powerful she could barely breathe. But not everything was peaceful. Tom found out Nathan had resigned, and the confrontation came sooner than either of them expected. He appeared one evening at the penthouse lobby demanding to see his father, fury radiating from every inch of him. Nathan met him alone in the downstairs lounge, refusing to expose Evelyn to the storm. Tom's words were sharp, bitter, soaked in betrayal. "You threw away everything for her," he shouted. "Your career, your reputation. Me." Nathan didn't raise his voice. "I didn't throw away you." "Really?" Tom laughed, broken and hollow. "Then why does it feel like you did?" Nathan's heart ached. "Because you're angry," he said softly. "But anger isn't the truth, and it isn't permanent." Tom shook his head, turning away. "I'm done," he whispered. "Don't expect me to come back this time." He walked out before Nathan could stop him. The glass doors closed with a sharp, metallic echo. Nathan stood in the empty lobby, sorrow pressing into him like a bruise. He didn't chase after him. He couldn't, not yet. But he whispered into the silence, his voice thick with pain. "When you grow up a little more, the door will still be open." When Nathan returned upstairs, Evelyn saw the strain in his eyes. "It was Tom," she said gently. Nathan nodded. "He needs time," he murmured. But the truth was etched into the corners of his expression. This was a wound he couldn't fix, not with logic, not with love. Evelyn stepped into his arms, resting her cheek against his chest, one hand sliding down to rest where her small bump was beginning to form. "He'll come back," she whispered, "because you raised him to know right from wrong. He just can't see past the hurt yet." Nathan's arms tightened around her. "I hope so." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "And until then, you have me." Something softened inside him, something fragile and aching and hopeful. "I do," he whispered. "I really do." In the penthouse overlooking the glittering sprawl of New York, with the world shifting beneath their feet and an unborn life nestled between them, they stood together, two imperfect people who had broken rules, broken expectations, and broken open for each other. Nathan had lost his position. Tom had walked away. The world was ready to judge, but Evelyn, warm, steady, impossibly brave, rested her hand over his heart and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in years, Nathan believed it. He had given up everything, and somehow in the ashes of that sacrifice, he had finally found home. Evelyn had always imagined that her final year at Columbia would be defined by sleepless nights, problem sets that devoured her weekends, and the relentless climb toward a degree she had promised herself she would earn no matter the odds. She never imagined it would also be defined by prenatal vitamins lined neatly beside her laptop cravings that struck at impossible hours, and the steady flutter of life beneath her ribs, reminding her that she was no longer fighting just for herself. At 5 months pregnant, she moved more carefully, hands subconsciously guarding her stomach steps, measured to keep her balance. But her resolve had never been sharper. The administration had long ago cleared her of wrongdoing, and classmates who once whispered behind her back now watched her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some whispered still envy, curiosity, judgment, but none of it mattered. Not compared to the weight of responsibility she carried inside her, not compared to the love waiting for her at home. She spent late nights bent over her research project, her growing belly nudging the edge of the desk as if reminding her to rest. Nathan would come by every few hours with water or fruit, or the kind of gentle scolding that made her smile despite her exhaustion. "You need sleep," he would murmur behind her hands, warm on her shoulders. "Sleep doesn't finish research," she would answer without looking up. "Neither does fainting," he would counter, lowering his face to her neck until she sighed in soft surrender. But even then he never pushed. He knew how hard she had fought to get into this university. He knew how fiercely she clung to the dream of proving she deserved her place here. And he knew perhaps better than anyone that telling Evelyn Stone she couldn't do something was a guaranteed way to watch her do it brilliantly, stubbornly, and with a fire no obstacle could extinguish. And so he supported her, not with pressure, but with presence. He transformed one of the penthouse rooms into a study, filled it with soft lighting and ergonomic chairs and sound-dampening curtains so she could work without fatigue crushing her. He joined her in silence some evenings, reading or reviewing proposals for his company, while she scribbled equations across whiteboards. On nights when her back ached, he knelt behind her and rubbed gentle circles until she relaxed against him, tension dissolving under his touch. But he never touched her work, never solved her problems, never offered answers. He only offered faith, quiet, unwavering faith that she could do anything she set her mind to. And Evelyn felt it. She felt it in the way his eyes warmed when she explained a new idea, in the way he listened like her thoughts were the most important words in the room, in the way he celebrated her progress with small gestures, a new notebook when she filled another one, her favorite snacks during long nights, a soft kiss on her forehead when she muttered equations in her sleep. Her belly grew. Her confidence grew with it. By the time she reached 6 months, her research had evolved into something she never dreamed she was capable of, a novel integration of computational modeling and neuro-pattern analysis, something her advisor called astonishing, innovative, a breakthrough for someone her age. But no praise mattered as much as the quiet pride she saw in Nathan's eyes. He attended her practice presentations, sitting in the back of the room like a shadow she drew strength from. He watched her speak with clarity and conviction, watched her hold an audience captive with intellect that cut sharper than any rumor, watched her become the version of herself she had always wanted to be, the version she had fought for with every breath. And when she doubted herself, which she did often, especially during nights of overwhelming exhaustion, he was beside her, reminding her with steady hands and steady words that brilliance didn't require perfection. It required courage. She had always had that. Finally, graduation day arrived. The sky was impossibly blue sunlight, catching on the edges of the campus's stone buildings, as if blessing the moment. Evelyn stood before the mirror, smoothing her gown over the curve of her stomach. Her cap sat slightly askew on her curls, which she had pinned back as neatly as she could, though a few rebellious strands sprang free, no matter how many times she adjusted them. Nathan appeared in this doorway, his tie slightly loosened from rushing around to find her gown pin and safety pins she insisted she didn't need. The moment he saw her, he stopped. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. Time seemed to still between them. "You look..." His voice failed him, something thick and raw rising in his chest. Evelyn's cheeks warmed. "It's just a gown." "No," he said quietly, stepping toward her. "It's you." His hand hovered over her stomach before resting there gently, reverently. "Both of you." Her heart clenched. He kissed her softly, just enough to steady them both before they left for the ceremony. The university courtyard was filled with rows of white chairs, friends and families scattered across them in bursts of color and anticipation. Evelyn took her seat among her classmates, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She wasn't just graduating. She was rising, reclaiming every part of herself she once thought broken, stepping into a future she never imagined possible. When her name was called, the applause that followed her felt unreal. She climbed the steps carefully, one hand on her gown, the other briefly touching her belly for balance. Eyes followed her, not with judgment now, but with admiration. Her advisor hugged her with a warmth that surprised her. "You earned this," he whispered. Every bit of it. And then she turned and found Nathan. He stood near the stage, separated by distance and ceremony, but connected to her by something deeper, something that had grown quietly between them all these months, love that had weathered storms neither of them had been prepared for. His eyes glistened, barely holding back emotion. When she caught his gaze, he smiled soft, first, then wider, then with a brightness that made her breath catch. His lips formed the words she didn't need to hear to understand. I'm proud of you. But he stepped closer when the crowd shifted enough for her to hear the tremor in his whisper as she descended the stage. You are the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen in my life. The world blurred. She blinked away, tears reaching for his hand, but he caught her first, steadying her as her balance shifted. His hand slipped to the small of her back, instinctive, tender, protective. She felt their child shift beneath her ribs, a soft reminder that this triumph wasn't hers alone. She had fought for it, but Nathan had believed in it. And now standing among the applause and laughter, with her degree in one hand and Nathan's warmth in the other, she realized something deeper than pride settled in her chest. She wasn't just graduating. She was becoming a mother, a scholar, a partner, a woman who had taken every wound life gave her and turned it into strength. Nathan leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers for a fleeting moment, unbothered by the crowd. You did it, he whispered. We did it, she corrected gently, but he shook his head with a softness that unraveled her. No, Evelyn. This was all you. She exhaled, trembling with emotion she couldn't contain. And in that sunlit courtyard, surrounded by the triumphant noise of new beginnings, she realized the storm that once threatened to destroy her had, in its own brutal way, cleared her path. Today, she stood at the edge of something magnificent. And tomorrow, she wouldn't be alone when she stepped into it. By the time Evelyn reached her 8th month of pregnancy, the world she once feared was collapsing around her, had become something she could finally breathe in. Her belly had grown into a perfect round curve, soft, warm, and full of quiet, steady life. Her research was complete, her degree in hand, and Nathan had already woven himself so deeply into her days that she could no longer imagine a version of her future where he wasn't the heartbeat beside her own. The only thing that felt unfinished was the space between them that had always been promised, but never formally sealed. Nathan saw it too, the way Evelyn's eyes softened every time she looked at the tiny clothes, folded neatly in drawers, the small nursery they had carefully assembled together, the hesitant, hopeful glances she gave him whenever he touched her stomach and whispered to their daughter. He felt the shift long before either of them said anything aloud. So, on a quiet morning in early summer, with her hair tied up messily and her fingers absently caressing the curve of her belly as she stood by the window, Nathan stepped beside her and touched the spot where their daughter liked to kick whenever she heard his voice. Marry me, he said, not planned, not dramatic, but as natural as breathing. Evelyn looked up at him, her lips parting in surprise, her eyes shimmering, as though she had been waiting for this moment without daring to ask for it. Nathan. Not tomorrow, he whispered, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. Not next year. Now. Before she arrives. I want our daughter to come into a world where everything is already steady. He paused, searching her face. Where you are already my wife. Because, Evelyn, I've been yours for a very long time. She blinked through tears that weren't sadness, but something deeper. Something so tender it hurt. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Nathan kissed her gently, as carefully as if she were made of glass, though both of them knew she was anything but fragile. She was the strongest person he had ever known. Within days, He had quietly arranged everything, not a grand spectacle or a display of wealth, but an intimate ceremony that reflected who they had become together. Malibu at sunset. A stretch of private beach. Only a handful of people they trusted. The rest of the world didn't need to approve, understand, or witness it. This moment belonged to them and the small life growing beneath Evelyn's heart. On the day of the wedding, the sky spilled a soft pink glow across the horizon, the kind of color that made the ocean look like molten rose gold. Evelyn stepped out of the small beach house with one hand resting on her stomach, her other lifting the soft white silk of her dress as she walked toward the shore. The gown hugged her beautifully simple, elegant shape to celebrate rather than hide the curve of her pregnancy. Her skin glowed under the sunset, her curls pinned loosely so the wind could play with them, her entire presence radiating a serenity Nathan had never witnessed in anyone before. She wasn't nervous, just full of love, of anticipation, of gratitude for every struggle that had carried her to this gentle moment. Nathan stood beneath an archway, draped in white linens, the ocean at his back. When he saw her, he forgot the air in his lungs entirely. She looked like something the universe itself had sculpted, fragile in her beauty, fierce in her presence, glowing from within in a way that made everything else fade. He didn't try to hide the emotion burning behind his eyes. He didn't care who saw. Evelyn reached him, breath catching softly as he took her hand. He looked down at her, as though committing every detail to memory, the way her dress curved around her belly, the way her lips trembled in a smile that held both disbelief and certainty, the way her fingers intertwined with his as if they had always belonged there. The officiant, an older man with kind eyes and a soft voice, began the ceremony. The ocean murmured behind them, wind carrying the scent of sea salt and jasmine from the arrangements that swayed gently at their sides. Evelyn could feel her daughter shifting inside her, as if the baby sensed the significance of the moment. The officiant turned to Nathan first. Nathan Pierce. He asked warmly, "Do you take Evelyn Stone to be your wife?" Nathan didn't wait for the rest of the question. His eyes shining with emotion, he didn't bother to hide, locked onto hers. "From the first night I held you," he said, voice low and reverent. "I've already chosen you." Evelyn's breath trembled. The officiant smiled, then turned to her. "Evelyn, do you?" "Yes," she whispered, before he could finish squeezing Nathan's hands. Her voice wavered as the weight of everything they had survived, rumors, fear, secret sacrifice, rose in her chest. "I choose you for me, for our daughter, and for the family we are building. Every day, every version of my life I want. You're in it." Nathan inhaled sharply, emotion tightening his throat. The officiant gently asked for the rings. Nathan slid a delicate band onto Evelyn's finger. Simple, elegant, a thin gold circle that shimmered in the fading light. Evelyn whispered her vow as she placed a ring on his hand. "You gave up a world for me," she murmured, her voice cracking. "But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life giving you a home." He closed his eyes as her words washed over him. The officiant stepped back, smiling. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Nathan leaned down, cupping Evelyn's face with both hands, as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. Their kiss was soft, not rushed or hungry, but deep and full, layered with everything they had endured and everything they knew they would face together. As their lips met, a sudden little kick nudged Evelyn from the inside. She gasped a quiet laugh against Nathan's mouth. He pulled back, startled. "What was—" She took his hand and guided it to the spot. Another tap from their daughter pressed beneath their joined palms. Nathan's face broke into a smile so wide, so disbelievingly full of joy, that Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. "She agrees," he whispered, thumb brushing the silk stretched over her belly. "She really agrees." Evelyn laughed through her tears. "Of course she does. The sun dipped lower, setting the sky ablaze behind them. Waves rolled gently toward the shore, catching the last rays of light. Their small group of loved ones, Nathan's trusted colleagues, Evelyn's closest friends, the dean who had quietly supported them, applauded softly, but it barely registered through the quiet cocoon the moment wrapped around them. The world blurred around the edges. It was just Evelyn, Nathan, and the small heartbeat growing between them. Nathan leaned his forehead against hers. "I love you," he breathed, "more than I ever thought I could love anything." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting their closeness anchor her. "And I love you," she whispered, "for who you are, not what you were." He kissed her again, slow, gentle, reverent, before guiding her toward the small table set with candles and dinner, though she could barely eat with the way her heart felt swollen inside her chest. Later, as the horizon faded into indigo and stars began shimmering overhead, Nathan wrapped Evelyn in his arms from behind, one hand resting over her belly, the other holding her close. "A family born from one chaotic night," Evelyn murmured, leaning into him. "One night that saved my life," he corrected softly, "and gave it meaning." She smiled, turning her head to kiss his jaw. "We made it, Nathan." "We did," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And we'll keep making it. Together." The waves whispered against the shore. Their daughter shifted again, gently nudging against Nathan's palm. He laughed softly, breath warm against Evelyn's neck. "See," he murmured, "even she believes in us." Evelyn placed her hand over his. "She's right to." The breeze swept around them, carrying the soft sounds of the ocean. And there in the golden hush of a Malibu sunset, surrounded by warmth, love, and the rhythm of new beginnings, they stood as a family finally whole, born from a wild night, neither remembered, clearly grown through trials, neither expected and strengthened by a love they chose every single day, a love that against all odds had become their home, a perfect, imperfect, extraordinary home, theirs, forever. The end.